We have a special guest, Kelly, who will be introduced by Haya.
Okay, hi. So we have with us Kelly O'Clesson from the Groundsmith Collective, which they describe themselves as doing conscientious landscape design. And they do both residential and public projects, which is good for us because we're kind of interested in both. And right now, I know that Kelly is contracted to the town of Somerset working on some sustainable maintenance projects. And I don't know too much about that, but we gave her some questions. Julie Greenberg helped me think of some of the things that we might want to know. And so Kelly's going to give us a little bit of information and then we'll be able to ask questions of her. Okay, Kelly?
Sure. Let me just quickly, do I need to refer to my email that you sent with the questions?
I'm not sure.
Did you actually give did you give me questions?
I did give you questions.
Okay.
You got them, right?
I'll just look at my email with you real quick. Okay. So hi, my name is Kelly O'Clesson. I am the owner of Groundsmith Collective, which is a landscape architecture firm out of Hyattsville, Maryland, just south of College Park by the university. We are contracted with the town to create a suite of deliverables, but one of the biggest deliverables is going to be an operations and maintenance manual for the town maintenance staff, Enrique and the maintenance crew. So that guide will be used to really guide them on what needs to happen throughout the calendar year for specific garden areas and public spaces outlined by the various committees that we've met with. So we've got the operations and maintenance manual, and then we're also going to be doing some trainings with those folks, and we're going to have one public training probably in the spring. COVID has really sort of fouled up our schedule, so we haven't scheduled that yet, but we're going to be doing some public outreach, and then we're also going to be creating maps of all the sites so that there's some existing plans that can be looked at and used for record keeping purposes. So that's what our role is with the town. This meeting is sort of done because of the goodness of my heart, and I care about what you guys are doing. This is definitely beyond my scope. But I have a list of questions here from Haya reached out about stormwater. So the first question on the list was, how suitable are rain gardens and bioswales, conservation landscaping, etc., for areas with the soils on Somerset lots? So that's a loaded question. So basically, the reality is that the United States Geological Survey has public data where you can actually find out the soil types for various regions. And so you can type in the address of Somerset and go to USGS to see what those soils are. And what they mean is they're telling you what the parent soils are. And parent soils are derived from the geological formations that are deep under the ground surface. So what happens when homes are built? Contractors will scrape off of the topsoil and they'll pile it. They'll either sell it and then buy back topsoil when the construction's done. But basically soil is seriously disturbed with new construction. So it's kind of hard to say what the soil quality is like. I know that the development has been around for a while. There are new homes that are being built, but the only real way to know if a property can accept something like a rain garden, you really have to do a percolation test. And a percolation test is something that you can do yourselves. You dig a hole 2 feet deep, 1 foot wide, If you happen to have a fancy soil auger, you can like literally turn it down deep, and you dig that hole, you fill it with water, and you're counting to see how quickly that water drains. You guys are all in luck that your taxpayer money is going to a program called Rainscapes. They have incredible resources on the Montgomery County Rainscapes website. They have a how to do a perk test, and they explain all about perk tests. But what you're looking for with a perk test, you're looking to see if the soil profile is able to accept additional water. If that perk test does not drain within, I think, something like 36 hours, it means it's absolutely unsuitable for a rain garden, because that would mean that you're creating a bioretention pond, which does not function anything like a rain garden. Rain gardens are supposed to hold water for about 24 hours, and in that time, the water is supposed to drain and then go out in the soil profile and down. So if it fails the perk test, that would not be a suitable design feature. You could possibly do a bioswale. A conservation landscape is essentially using native plants to help slow water that is moving on the surface. So it's just helping like intercept stormwater that is traveling across the surface. I'm giving, you guys asked a lot of heavy, like loaded questions, but I mean, a lot of Rainscapes documentation explains all of this in detail, but I'm just trying to give you guys some kind of quick brief explanation. So all of these, the rain garden, bioswale, conservation landscape, those are all different best management practices that should be deployed depending on the situation. So like if your soil can take extra water, a rain garden might be suitable. A bioswale simply conveys water. That's all it does. It's basically directing water to a different location, but it's slowing it in the process. That's all it's doing. It is soaking up some water, but it's really a conveyance. It's a conveyance system. And a conservation landscape is really just trying to add friction to slow stormwater. That's all that. And pollinators when you use native plants. So yeah, it's really very site specific.
Can I interrupt? So I didn't realize until now, I'm sorry, that rain gardens couldn't just go anywhere. Do you have any idea? Did you guys know that? I mean, there are some in Somerset. Do you have any idea how likely it is that, is that just a quality of what the soil was before we ever came here? Does that make sense?
No, that doesn't make sense.
Okay, it's like, if the site was if the ground was not good for a rain garden, if you fail your percolation test, is that just a function of what was there before man came here, so to speak?
It could be both, but most likely most of the surfaces in your town have been disturbed by man.
I see. Okay.
But it's really hard to say like what the extent is. But I mean, we're kind of getting into some like nerdy like soil science and like physics. But, like what happens when they build houses is they like basically they take all of the living matter, they scrape all of it off, they pile it, and then they excavate with huge machines. And those huge machines are very heavy, and they basically destroy soil structure, which means that they compress soil structure. And when you compress soil structure, it means that you're further limiting the soil's ability to percolate. So it's really hard to say, lot to lot. I have no idea, but
okay,
that's why you can do a perk test and you can see immediately. So a lot of people think that places so this is something I need to be really, really clear, because all of you are stewards and you're going to take this information to your residents. You never plant a rain garden where water is sitting. That is absolutely the opposite and wrong. You don't put a rain garden where water collects and sits. That really shows that the water's not draining, which would be an absolutely inappropriate location for a rain garden. You want to place a rain garden that is in a location that is in a low point where it collects water, like from your downspout. You can't have a rain garden at an elevation above your downspout. You need to have it in a place, because water, another truth is that water goes downhill. Water travels perpendicular to topography. So you need to site that rain garden in a place that it can intercept that water source. But it also needs to pass the percolation test. So there's two really main factors.
Okay, thank you. That was helpful.
Yep. So it's very site specific. And, you know, you also have to be, yeah, I mean, there's lots of, like I said, material on Rainscapes, the Rainscapes website. So I would definitely do some investigation. Rainscapes also offers citizens up to $7,500 in rebate, which is, you guys are lucky being in MoCo in Prince George's County. Our program only offers $2,500. Montgomery County actually listened to residents and upped the amount because $2,500 is a drop in the bucket. You know, that costs our design services to design a residential rain garden is about $2,500 to $3,000. So even if you just for design, so to build one, depending on the size, you could spend $3,000 to $10,000. You know, it really just depends on how extensive, how much you want to plant it. So that's another question. I don't know if you asked or not, but the price can range depending on how big that rain garden is.
Kelly. Oh, it's frozen.
While we're waiting for Kelly, I just wanted to mention that some of the things that I was posting came from Mr. Gene Rovac, who is Shannon's father-in-law, who I don't want to speak for you, Mr. Rovac, but has some engineering qualifications relating to stormwater and soil. I believe that's right. Correct me if I'm wrong.
That's true. About 40 years in stormwater management and flood control.
So a couple years.
Yeah.
Looks
Hi.
like
Sorry about that. I got the blue screen of death on my laptop screen, so I'm calling it on my phone. You guys still there?
Yeah.
We
Okay,
got
cool.
I hear you.
Let's see. The second question, can you read it to me? I don't have access to my laptop. Can you read the question for me?
Just give me 1 second. Let me get out of full screen. I pulled them up here, but I got to pull it up.
Sure.
Yeah. Sorry. The second question was, how do engineered and non-engineered retention features need to be maintained? And how can a layperson tell if they need maintenance? So it's just asking us how this is like you can put things in, but then we're worried about maintenance.
Yeah, totally. So, you know, one thing to be mindful of, and this is something that we're going to bring up in our operations and maintenance manual, is that, you know, wind blows, birds poop. There's a lot of dynamic actions that are going on that make landscaping, I don't know, a little bit, it forces you to engage with the land, I think more than a lot of modern people would like. But because of that, you know, there needs to be a commitment to maintenance and understanding like what the expectations of the garden should be. But another really important thing to understand is for rain gardens specific, if you think about it logically, rain gardens are catching stormwater runoff, right? From like your roof, from possibly, you know, surfaces. And water is a conveying material. So with water comes weed seeds. So stormwater features like bio swales and rain gardens, they actually need to be maintained almost 2 to 3 times as often, because every time it rains, that rainwater is carrying particulate with it, and weed seeds are very light. So even if your garden is maintained, you could possibly be getting, you know, weed seeds from your neighbors. So it's really important to keep that in mind. That's why you see a lot of gardens like in DC and in like even public spaces, urban spaces that are failing, it's because their maintenance schedule is severely under-maintained. They need to be maintained, like I said, 2 to 3 times more often, because every time it rains, it's bringing in a whole new crop of seeds.
Okay. Okay.
Which isn't, you know, that's not a problem. It's just, I think people don't realize that. They think they can just like, you know, set it, forget it, but that's not the dynamic medium we're talking about.
Mhm. So how frequently does it, you said it's, how frequently might that need maintenance then? More than once a year?
Oh, it needs to be maintained probably. You probably need to weed the garden, you know, multiple times a season.
Okay.
So you actually need to understand what was planted in that garden. So what should be there and what shouldn't be there, which is an extra level of like commitment and like engagement.
Okay. Should we move on to the next question, or we're moving right along here?
Did I answer that? I'm not sure.
No,
if
I think
answered
so.
it.
I don't know if
Okay.
anyone else has questions. I mean, I asked a couple, but does anyone else have questions on that?
Well, I think you asked about like bioengineered soils. So, I mean, for a residential setting, you guys really shouldn't have to worry about any kind of like bioengineered soils, because you really can get away with just really healthy, you know, compost and natural parent soils. Bioengineered soils really come into play when you have rain gardens and design systems that are in more urban settings that are quite large, that are designed to engineering specifics. So that's usually like in a scenario where you're doing a soil replacement, where like you can't even, you know, there are like, I know I mentioned that like when you do a percolation test, that if it fails, you can't have a rain garden there. Well, if you have money and you have a will, then you can completely do a soil replacement and use engineered soils and go that route. But that's really not necessary and wouldn't be appropriate for a residential setting. And now in like, you know, the city where you have a LEED certified building and site, that would might make sense.
What can you do if your water's pooling? What would be a solution to that?
Well, what that means is that you have destroyed soil structure and or all clay, and you have a low point, so you need to regrade. Or you need to intercept, you know, the stormwater runoff somewhere uphill and redirect it away from that location.
So Kelly, do the tree roots in the yards like have a lot to do with that as well? Because we've got some pretty big trees.
Tree roots actually help with stormwater management. Yeah, trees usually aren't the problem. It's usually humans. So if you can describe a specific scenario, I could try to problem solve it, but I'd have to see it really.
Okay, well, we have like, I've got a lot of storm runoff in my yard, and it goes like up from the hill, through our neighbors, through my yard, into this big drain. Mm-hmm. And it got really backed up, and so it flooded our basement this past summer.
Okay.
And so now, though, my next door neighbors, where it's coming from, they're going to be tearing down their house. And so I'm more concerned than ever that, you know, I don't know what's going to happen, because they have standing water in their yard, like right now even. So I'm not sure what I should expect in number one, and number two, if there's anything that I can do.
There's a couple things. So trees are absolutely magical for many reasons. The first is that when a raindrop falls from the sky, it actually falls with quite incredible force to the ground. And if you didn't have covering on soil, meaning plants, you would have constant erosion. So what trees do, if you think about how layered branches are and tree leaves, raindrops bounce off of like, you know, 20 leaves by the time it finally hits the ground, which actually slows it and reduces the size of the raindrop and does a tremendous job in reducing erosion. Tree roots themselves actually hold soil together, so it actually keeps soil from eroding. It's hard to say specifically with your situation. I know that there's a big issue in the town with people building to the extent of their lots and getting approval to put in big houses. And you can imagine why that's a problem, because you're getting rid of mechanisms that are natural, like tree leaves and natural ground cover, and you're replacing it with hard, solid roofs. So water hits that and you have a tremendous amount of volume that now the landscape has to manage. And the landscape was was not built to manage that. So the way to do that is you hire a designer and you would have to come up with a solution, you know, together with your neighbors, or maybe a site solution specifically on your property. You know, it really kind of depends. It depends on where the source is coming from.
Right. Okay. Well, I mean, I guess the good news is we have a gigantic tree in our backyard, so that probably helps quite a bit.
Quite a bit, yeah.
A lot of the buildings, the new houses around here solve their problems with dry wells. I wonder if you could comment on the use of dry wells.
Yeah, so a dry well is essentially a large pit in the ground full of gravel, and it operates sort of like a cistern, except that the walls are earth. So some of the water does go horizontally and some of it does go down eventually. So that's all it is. You're basically digging a big hole, you're filling it with gravel. So if you dig a big hole, all of that hole is airspace. And when you fill it with gravel, about half of that hole becomes available for airspace. Right. So that half is usually, it's airspace when it's not raining. When it's raining, it's full of water. And those dry wells are all designed to be the size of how big the roof area is. And their engineers figure out how much volume comes from a 2-inch storm, a 5-inch storm, whatever it is. And the county has specifications for all of those.
But I mean, do you feel like that's a good solution?
Well, it's out of sight, out of mind. So if you're somebody who doesn't want to look at it and you know, have specific aesthetic issues with rain gardens, you basically can hide it and make it so it's not visible. The problem is that you can't put a dry well in the middle of like tree roots, because you would be, you know, injuring your tree's roots. So siting a dry well in the appropriate location is critical. Okay. And the math is really important. I mean, it's not like rocket science, but I have worked with quite a few clients that have had contractors put in dry wells and they did not size them properly, which means that the contractor didn't take the time to measure the square footage of the roof and do the quick calculations for how much volume comes from a 2-inch storm event, and sizing that dry well to be appropriate to catch all the water. I've been to clients where they're undersized and it is thousands of dollars nightmare. And so, you know, we come in as landscape architects, and we explain to them in the kindest, most loving way that, you know, those contractors didn't do their jobs in sizing it appropriately. So they're going to have to, you know, either do the work again and have it sized to that specific storm event, or come up with a different solution.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Should I go on to the next question? I mean, we can leave time for questions at the end. I don't know how long you can be with us, Kelly. This is wonderful that you're here.
Yeah, sure. Let me, I'm actually going to try to log back into the email, or I'm going to log back in through my laptop because it reset. So I'm going to do that while we're talking. You can just like allow me.
Okay. Well, the next question was, are there any builders you can recommend, even builders in other areas of the country who can join us remotely? Who are doing innovative engineering and non-engineering home construction design and retrofit design for runoff retention. I'm sorry. So is there any builders you can recommend that are doing innovative home construction
Sorry about that.
and retrofit design? Yeah, we also retrofit. Kelly, you're muted.
So I think I understand what you're getting at. When you say builders, are we talking about like
like if a house is being built, or are we talking about the house that's looking for solutions and retrofits?
But both, I think. Julie posed this question. Julie, I see you nodding. You're yes. Okay, Julie Greenberg.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, off the top of my head, I can't think of, well, when it comes to stormwater, there's quite a bit you can do. I mean, if you have a new house and you have the resources and you're really eco-conscious and you're, maximizing, rebates and that kind of thing. I mean, really what our industry is trying to do is to get people to think about like what we call treatment trains. So basically daisy chaining a bunch of different techniques together to have like a holistic solution on a property. So, the county has funds for people to do rain barrels. Rain barrels are essentially cisterns. So they are helpful if you actually use the water, because a cistern is essentially just a big tank, and they fill up in our area with one of our big storms. They fill up pretty quickly, and again, they have to be sized to like how big the roof is. But if you use the water, like let's just say you're like a real kind of granola munchy person and you want to have like, a gray water system to like flush your toilets, you could actually collect water from your roof, and you could actually build your house so that you have a system. So all the gray water that you collect from your roof could be used to, flush toilets, wash laundry, that kind of thing, not for drinking. Wouldn't be considered potable, but if you could have a system that would filter the water, it could potentially make the cistern water potable, which means drinkable, safe for human consumption. So there's all kinds of like really cool technologies. So I don't have any. I'd have to like do research on my own, but I mean,
Okay.
that's one thing you could do. You could look into LEED, leaders in environmental. Oh my God, I forgot the acronym at this point. Leaders in energy and environmental design. I can't remember, but they have LEED for residential properties. And I think if you go to the US Green Building Council, you can get tons of written material, and you probably could find contractors as well. They have like geothermal technology where you're getting heat from the ground. There's, for stormwater specific, it's like cisterns, it's like collecting water, using it in the building itself, using it to irrigate your property. I know a lot of people like their nice lawns. You could use that water to irrigate all the lawns, all your gardens. That kind of thing is what I'm thinking about. Yeah.
Okay.
Or pervious paving. So you can do paving that actually allows water to go through the cracks. So that's another technique and technology you can use for hardscaping. So permeable paving.
We had a couple more questions. I don't know if we should, Julie, you might want to jump in here. Well, there was a question, a very technical question about how the auger test of soil permeability, the DPS's test differ from the DEP's perk tests, and why do the two Montgomery County agencies use different tests? So that's a very technical question.
Whoever asked the technical nerdy alphabet soup question is going to have to actually spell out the words that they're using.
Yeah, Julie,
Well, why don't we open it up to other questions, and then these other more technical ones, I think can.
I mean, that really sounds like a question for like the people you get your taxpayer money pays to the county.
I think we need to ask them. We're also, I'm really curious about why there are so many waivers.
You need to have Rainscapes do a talk with your town and talk. The landscape architect who runs the program is fabulous, and you guys really should tap into them.
Well, who was that?
I'll think of her name in a minute.
Okay, Rainscapes. Okay. Well, I can find out. Yeah.
Can I ask a question, Haya? I don't know if you can hear me now.
I can, now I can, yeah.
Oh, okay, great. Is this a good time?
Yeah,
yeah, Kelly, thank you so much. This is helpful. And it's a non-technical, you'll be maybe happy to hear. This is going back to your comments about the trees and the leaves. So we have various subcommittees of this stormwater committee, as you know, and one of us, we're looking at the impact of climate change, the impact of trees. So I've been researching kind of what are standard amounts of water that tree roots absorb by tree diameters, and then now you're mentioning about the leaves. So are there sources that you feel, so we're compiling information to share with the town, that you feel are particularly reputable or reliable in terms of both the tree roots and that? I thought that was quite interesting. You mentioned about the leaves bouncing water as well. And if you want to tell me afterward, just if that's fine too. But
Yeah, I'm not sure at the top of my head. I know, yeah, I'd have to think about it. I know, so there's the International Society of Arboriculture, which is ISA. That's like the professional body of tree people, arborists like myself and folks that study trees for a living. So I probably would look to ISA for that kind of information. There are there's like The Hidden Life of Trees, which is a fantastic book. And there are publications like that probably cite scientists and ecologists that are doing a lot of this research. Off the top, I don't know stats off of top of my head, but I feel like those are the kinds of.
Okay. I mean, I found some online. I just, I wasn't sure quite what's, just to grab the first thing you find on Google. It didn't seem like a great system, but.
Yeah, probably not. Because I know people have written, the International Society of Arboriculture actually puts out monthly publications on scientific research that's been done on exactly what you're talking about. Right. So I'd tap them. They'd love.
Okay. Okay. And is it correct? It's basically based on the diameter of the tree. Is that a key factor, would you say? In terms of the size of the roots, what?
Oh yeah. So the rule of thumb is that, so for every inch in diameter of a tree, so that's the diameter of a tree, for every inch in diameter, you extend 1.5 feet from the center of the tree outwards, and that's the radius. So, if you had my math's not that great, but you could do the math. So if it was like a 10-inch diameter tree, which is not a very big tree, it's a young tree, you would multiply that by 1.5, and you would get how many feet in radius extended from the center of the trunk out. That's the critical root zone. And you really shouldn't be screwing around in that area. And when you start to look at the big trees in your town and you start to do those calculations, it's like, oh my God, my entire property is the critical root zone. But it's really important to understand that, because you really don't want to impact 25% of that critical root zone. Right. Otherwise, you're going to start seeing, if the next season you look up in the canopy, you're going to start seeing dieback. You're going to start seeing dead branches. A lot of people get away with killing trees because they can't be pinned to it, because the dieback is over years. But, as a savvy designer and arborist and landscape architect, I can actually tell, if somebody puts a new driveway in and they sever the roots of a tree, or they put a new sidewalk in and they sever the roots of a tree, you'll see in the canopy the death from cutting those roots within a year or two. You'll start to see it. People who aren't, arborists may not really realize the difference, but 99% of the time it's directly in relation to cutting those roots.
Okay. And we were looking at the full removal of entire trees as another, then you're obviously getting all the roots, right?
Yeah. That's a really good question. If you cut a tree down and you leave the roots, how long is that tree going to still be holding on to soil? Those are all kinds of really interesting questions. Yeah. Okay. But trees do a huge service. Again, like I showed you, if you could see it, if you were to think of an illustration in your head of the layers of leaves and one raindrop bouncing, the service that's providing is just I'd love to have somebody do calculations.
Okay, so that's something else we should note in terms of the trees, both the roots and the what would you call the death back, blowback? What did you call it?
Dieback. That's when you look at a canopy and you're like, oh, there's a dead branch up there on that side, or that's the dieback is in relation to the damage to the tree.
Right. Okay. But just and my last one. So the actual leaves help with stormwater as well, I guess.
Oh my God, yeah, and they cool the air. There's a thing called evapotranspiration. So plants do it, not only trees. So they actually are emitting
water back into the air. That's why it feels cooler when you're around trees and greenery. So there's tons of environmental, I mean, then you got habitat, and then there's this, you know, the ecological benefits.
Thank you. Thanks so
Jan had a question.
Yeah, I wanted to go back just to when we were talking about rain gardens and the perk tests and stuff like that. One of the things we're kind of, I'm starting to work on resources and things that have worked and things that haven't worked. But one of the things that I seem to be finding is that people say, well, it won't work if we, you know, if we have clay soil or this or that. If it fails the perk test, there's still water there after 37 hours. Is there something that the ground can be prepared in some way? I mean, I know it's more expensive, it would be, and it's probably more work, but could you put a rain garden there, do something to the soil, drill more holes down or something like that?
I mean, it's pretty much understood that if an area fails a percolation test, that should not be a location for a rain garden unless you are committed to the financial expense of doing a complete like soil replacement, engineered soils. You absolutely can over time improve the permeability of that soil by adding compost, you know, doing soil amendments. There are things you can do to.
But so for instance, say in new construction, if the soil is really bad on the site that they're doing, and it doesn't pass the perk test, so the cheapest solution would be to do like a dry well or something like that, or the most reasonable solution.
I mean, that's the solution that's sort of understood at the county level. I mean, I mean, they're obviously giving credits to builders to do it. Whether or not it's going to work, I can't tell you. I mean,
are they giving financial credits to builders to put dry wells in?
I don't know if they're getting financial credits, but I believe that they're, you know, for new construction, I mean, they have to manage a certain percentage of stormwater runoff.
Yeah, no, okay, yeah.
I'm not sure. There are financial incentives, you know, for just construction. I'm not sure about new construction, and I guess it depends on the jurisdiction. I don't know about Montgomery County.
Okay, no, that's fine. I was just worried, but so the solution wouldn't be to say, well, make your ground better. You have to do it in a more easy and affordable way. It would be find something else other than a rain garden. For new construction.
Yeah, I mean the dry well, like so what would okay, so if you put a dry well in and your soil didn't perk, what would essentially happen is water would sit in your gravel pit, and what they do is I think they usually have what they call a pop-up. There's like I call the oh shoot valve, where like, you know, there has to be an overflow for that huge storm, that 100-year, that 1,000-year storm. There has to be engineered. There has to be what happens if this is a huge storm.
Okay.
And so what happens is those systems have overflows, and that's when the water, you'll have something like a pop-up where like it'll pop up out of the ground and the water will just surface, you know, come to the surface. So yeah, I mean, if they put a dry well in the ground and that soil is just really not able to accept water, I mean, it will sit there and hopefully eventually will drain if you don't have rain for, you know, multiple weeks. But you know, you know, that's just how it works scientifically, you know. But builders will do what they need to do to get that signed piece of paper so they can make their money.
Okay.
And that's just, I hate to say it any other way.
No, I was just curious,
you know?
kind of, what to do. You know, I know about rain gardens, but not the other stuff. So I was just curious.
Yeah, I mean, always, you know, building your soil and tending to your soil is like almost like us tending to our own health. You know, a community is only as healthy as they take care of their land. So, you know, we always need to be taking care of our land and being stewards of the land. So, you know, building that soil and making that soil healthy through compost, and you know, don't blow your leaves into bags and then take it away. You know, leave those leaves, you know, in your garden, chop them up. You know, we should always be, if you think about how natural systems work, trees drop their leaves, the leaves stay on the ground, but the leaves add as an extra, like when a raindrop falls on leaves that have fallen, that's actually protecting the soil. Those leaves are acting as mulch. So, you know, nature's figured this out for millennia, and we're the ones that are just catching up.
Okay. Thank you.
Did you guys have any other questions?
Yeah, so we might be, are there any other questions? Anyone?
Yeah, I think we need to probably move on to the rest of the meeting, but this has been very helpful.
Cool.
We
Right.
super
Thank you
appreciate it,
yeah,
Kelly. Thank you so
very
much
you.
for coming and giving us your time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm always here. Send me an email if you guys have any follow-up questions, but definitely get, oh, Ann English, ANN English. She runs Rainscape. She's fabulous. She was a University of Georgia grad. She's really passionate about this stuff, and I'd have her speak to the community.
It just gave us a lot of basic information that we, at least for me,
Yeah,
just, yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
yeah.
Thank
I
you.
mean, nobody should feel dumb. We're all in a continuum of learning and
Yeah.
just, educating ourselves. So
Okay.
cool. All right. Thank you.
You can sign off. Okay, bye.
Thank you so much.
Okay, that was great. So hopefully people know a little more than they did. We're going to move to the subcommittee, and survey will go first. We did not get a whole lot of responses from the committee, so I just want to make sure, did everybody receive the survey?
Yes.
Okay.
Dan, you're on mute.
Who's on mute?
Jan, I got the survey and tried to fill it out, but I couldn't go past the first page. And then I never got back to tell you guys.
And I have a little feedback once you guys ask for it.
It wouldn't allow you to go.
Right, it wouldn't allow me to go to the second page.
So I did notice if you missed a question or didn't fill something out, then it doesn't let you go. But
I did go back and double check. I mean, I didn't notice that, but that may be. And then I forgot to email you guys back and tell you.
Is Brian on?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Have you heard of this problem before?
No, but you are correct. If someone did not fill out a required question, and most of the questions we are requiring answers to.
Okay.
Yeah,
If you didn't answer a required question, then it would not let you go to the next page.
Okay, I'll go
That's the
back and
case.
check and see what I did. Yeah, thanks.
And then, Brian, are these answers going to be recorded, or are these just, is this a test?
Well, if we're going to make changes to the survey, to the questionnaire, then this should just be a test.
Okay.
So far, we only have 3 people who have responded.
Oh.
So it would be good if others could go through it and see if you have any feedback. Or maybe you went through it and didn't submit it, but yeah.
Ryan, do you want feedback now or not?
Well, can we hold on one second? I just.
Oh, sure. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Okay. So what we all did is we went through everything really carefully. We had a lot of comments from people, and we sort of went through and discussed whether we thought it was, redundant, helpful, or maybe it was more of a loaded question or might sway respondents a certain way. So we obviously didn't want that, because we really are looking for unbiased opinions, especially with the first one, to find out what people really think and whether they perceive that it is a problem. Our originals, we were supposed to release it yesterday, but we held off for this meeting just in case, anybody had some concerns that they hadn't raised before, or thought there was something really important that was left off or needed to be added. Before we get into sort of the content, the idea was in the next day or so, we want to get it on as many kind of platforms in the town as we can, whether it's on the town website, whether it's on the town still has a listserv, is that correct? Pardon?
No,
Oh, no.
Okay.
it does not have a listserv anymore.
Okay, that's what I thought. And somebody said, no, they did. So, okay. So the Sarah Morris listserv is the listserv, is that correct? Kind of the operating one that most people in town are.
But the town has a way to,
A website.
not a website, they broadcast things to people, like the announcements and stuff.
Town announcements.
Announcement. Okay, yeah. So we were going to look at the listserv, the announcement, posting on the town. And then realizing that some people may not be connected in any of those ways, we would then mail a hard copy to that particular household. And then, of course, following up is really important to get those surveys back if people opened them and forgot about it, or they didn't mail it back. We're going to try and collect them so we can get as many respondents as possible. We also, if you've looked on the Google Docs, we have a letter that sort of explains what the purpose of the survey is, and kind of for people who may not have been following, what was the purpose of the committee and then the survey and what it is that we hope to find out. And that would go along with the letter. I don't want to put Steve on the spot, and I don't know if you got my email, because I was trying to think, how does this get introduced to people? I mean, who should be the person who kind of says, this is important, let's do it? So I was thinking that he would be a great person to encourage people to fill it out when it's first introduced, but we can talk about if there's, if he wants to do it, or if there's other people who might feel would make the people more likely to fill it out or see the urgency in doing it. And then starting around February 1, we would do the follow-up, and hopefully within a week or two compile the data and write a report. So my other committee members, Courtney and Brian, do you want to add something?
Nope, you covered it pretty well.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, that pretty much covers it, I think.
Okay, so if we want, those are the kinds of things. And one of the things I'd like to know if people have some good ideas about how else we could get this out, or what you think the most effective way is to convince people to fill it out.
I see a question from Marnie, Ellen.
Oh,
I see Marnie raising her hand.
Oh, Marnie, go ahead. Sorry.
I just wanted to check in and see whether you all had talked with our town attorney, or you're aware of what the public requirements are for a survey that's done by a town committee. We got into this issue when the Environment Committee sent out a petition, and the question then became, well, what should be public information? I'm not an expert on this. Maybe Matt can say a little bit about what our attorney said, or maybe Ellen, you want to talk with our attorney, or Brian, someone.
Sure.
Sure. Just briefly, are you able to hear me okay? I have headphones on, so.
Yes.
Okay, so just briefly, the long and short of it was that if the petition is done by a town committee, the responses are public records under the Public Information Act, and so they would be.
Matt, you're going in and out.
Sorry, can you hear me better now?
Yeah,
But
but we
we
missed
lost
half
you
of
for a
what you
while.
just said.
Almost everything you said other than public information.
Figures. That figures. The long and short of it was that if the petition is done by a town committee, the responses are public records under the Public Information Act, and so they are subject to public disclosure.
Matt, does that mean that every individual response is so if household X responded in a certain way, that becomes part of the public record, or just the aggregate data?
I'm not sure how exactly the data is stored, but the data that we receive, so I would take that to mean the response.
The responses.
Anybody who wanted access to the information that you as the committee are seeing would have the right to that information, in other words.
So if I want to know how my neighbor responded to this survey, I can ask for that information.
I don't know specifically that's a legal question that I don't know what the burden it is in terms of needing to justify the information, if there is any. But my understanding is that any and all of the information and data that's available would be subject to a public disclosure. Yeah.
So it sounds like we need to talk to the lawyer and get clarification on it. And also, I guess, any guidance on how the data is then stored. If there's, applicable laws around that as well.
Well, question, I don't know if anybody can answer this, but if, we were asking people for their addresses. If we did not know addresses or names, I'm just thinking if people wanted not to have their actual survey public, if you don't have identifying information on it, and you didn't collect it, does that, I guess it would be hard to find out who's turned it in and who hasn't, though.
Yeah, and also, if
the street on, if you put the street on, just the street, people could say maybe.
The thing is, I think some of our information may, I'm assuming, I don't know, that we may kind of cross tab that with sort of topography. So for example, if, Jan, I know you're at the bottom of a hill.
Yeah.
So if we get really different answers from that whole lower Trent, I think there's implications to the information, setting aside all the inter-neighbor dynamics or intra-neighbor dynamics, what have you. So I would think in terms of the content, because of the nature of what we're asking about, it actually where we live matters because it's a stormwater issue. If it's just your opinion about Somerset,
Right.
General, that's my opinion, but yeah, so.
And has this been contentious? Is that why the town attorney has been brought in the past? Is there something in a past survey that was contentious?
Well, I don't, to an extent, I think that there was not, I think Brian's idea to just get clarification from the town attorney is probably a good one. I think that it just caught a previous committee by surprise that any of the information could be public. And so they felt like they didn't want to betray people's trust that had maybe answered a petition or a survey that they had assumed was anonymous, and to now have it not be the case.
Yeah, so if we would have to let people know after we talk to the attorney that if everything has to be public, that it's not anonymous, is basically what.
Yeah, we would have to disclose that in the survey, which
Right.
may or may, well, you would presume would only decrease the response rate, hopefully not too much. So, certainly the committee's going to have access, or the subcommittee is going to have access to this data no matter what. The other thing we can't control, we could, but it would be a lot more complicated. We can't control who's responding. I could fill it out for Marnie if I wanted to, and nobody would know. I won't do that, Marnie. But because we're not doing any sort of identification, verification, anything like that. You just type in your address.
I don't think that's a big concern.
I hope not.
I think people in Somerset hopefully have something better to do. Yeah. If not, that we have an issue, we need an entertainment committee for the town. But
World is ending and we're gonna go fill out our neighbors.
Well, I will fill it out for you, Marnie, if you want me to. If it's easier and you tell me how to fill it out, I'll do that.
Yeah.
Not without your instructions.
Yeah. So how do we give feedback? Is it now or we have to
go
write?
ahead. Let's
Sure, real quick. So I did do it. So actually one of my things is from that. So I think there'd be a couple, overall, I think it's really useful and helpful. I think it'd be helpful to say, because what I found out is, Brian knows because I wrote him, if you are in the middle of it and then stop and close that page, nothing's saved. It's not like you can save and return it. So I think it'd be helpful in it to say, this does not be saved and we estimate how long you think it'll take. And so plan to do it in one sitting, because I literally had filled out most of it and then went literally look up something about what the year of the house was and lost the whole thing. So I think that, and then I guess that's one thing. And then this issue that I guess Jan, I think mentioned that maybe put, in other things, you see asterisks that are when it's required, and just say, you won't be able to advance if you don't answer all the asterisks, like just explanations about that, I think would be helpful.
Okay.
I know there was mention about that 1,000, 5,000 thing. And I guess the other is maybe just say the kinds of information that's needed. Because I was like, oh, wait, what year is my house? Oh, wait, how much is all that? Like these things I've been spending. So maybe, and sometimes you see this on other surveys, it'll be helpful to know year of your house, what kind of expenses whatever you had, just so they know, because you're kind of thrown off guard, especially if you can't save the document. I assume there's no setting that you can save whatever was done and return to it. I assume that's not a functionality we have, because if so, that'd be really good. And then I know you guys mentioned about the 5,000 liter, and I guess maybe this is obvious to everyone, but really we're talking about rainstorms. I know everyone uses the term stormwater, as do we, but just maybe even in the introduction to say this is about, rainstorms, stormwater, because really it's talking about when it rains. I mean, that's what we're talking about, but I don't know that, and I'm on the committee, so go figure, right? But I was like, wait, is this stormwater officially, or is it just rain? So I just, even a basic for idiots, maybe explanation, like, so, kind of dummy proofing and just telling people what to expect in terms of, like when you start a survey, you don't know if it's a 2-second or a 1 hour. So maybe, I don't know if you guys estimate like how long it'll take just to say that kind of thing. So those are just more mechanicals. And then I guess the other thing is, so I don't know if there could be something either like an open-ended, do you have something else you want to say and there's a big space, or if you'd like to tell us anything further, place to give your name and or phone, because like, for example, my across the street neighbor said she saw I was on the committee on whatever the listserv or something, and she said, oh, my mom, who's elderly, had terrible problems with flooding and stormwater. I'd really like to talk to you. So I haven't had a chance to talk to her, like just to give people like that the chance to speak to your committee. I think some sort of open-ended thing. Those are just a couple of really basic things.
Yeah, I would just say that you were much more diligent than I was. I filled it out. I think it's fine to guess and give your best estimates in terms of things that
No, I didn't go look at the bill, but I mean, just like, well, the house year, I know is stupid. I knew sometime in the 1950s, that's probably good enough, but anyway, but just my point is there's lots of reasons someone closes their program by accident in the middle of something, just because life happens or, so I think just to warn people about that would be helpful.
So a little more directions maybe at the beginning so that people know what they're.
Yeah. To manage expectations and stuff, so yeah.
Okay, any other?
Sounds good.
Sorry?
No, that sounds good. Good suggestions.
And I think someone mentioned those differentiators of how much you spent, right? Like
well, that was Julie Greenberg's point, and that email was just between the three of us. So Julie, you can say what your suggestion was, and then, yeah.
Well, I just think the increments of spending did not go high enough. I think the last one was 5,000 and above. And I think that's, you're going to have to.
Got it. Yeah.
What if someone spent 20,000? That's not close to 5,000. I think so. I just adding increments.
Okay.
And you guys talked about 5 years for many things. Is there a reason for that? I mean, like we've had is that because we want to kind of catch recent stuff? Because are things older than 5 years, say 10 years, is it germane, relevant, of interest, for what we're looking for? I don't know.
Well, we did talk about, we went back and forth on how many years. And so I think we were trying to get things that were more recent history. It wasn't like we weren't interested in things that happened, 10 years ago, but given that the problem seems to be getting a lot worse, but it's not anything, it's not a scientific number. If could be changed. I don't know, committee members, do you recall?
I mean, I think overall we were just trying to capture information that would help us move forward with solutions. And I think the thinking was that 10-year-old data is a lot less useful for that purpose than 5-year-old data.
That's fine then. I just was curious. Yeah, because I mean, I was just thinking, we've done a ton of things cost like the last 5 years, but then are these stuff before that not relevant? I get that's fine. That's fine.
Okay. Anything else? Any other comments?
Franny has her hand up.
Oh, I'm not seeing these.
She's raised her hand and everything.
Aw.
Two hands now.
Go ahead.
Hi there. This has been so interesting. I'm thankful that you guys are pursuing all this stuff. I just had a very basic question. Obviously, I haven't seen your draft survey, but I know that sometimes when I get things into my Comcast email and I try to click on them, it sends me into Safari. And then, if you get something in your Gmail, it'll send you into Google Chrome. And so I think if you have instructions at the beginning about which browser works better for your survey, it would be good to put that information into the, the directions early, just so people know how to open it up, because sometimes one works better than the other. So that's my only comment. So I look forward to this when it comes out.
It's a Google survey. So works very well in Chrome. I'll sort of, unless anybody knows, I will look into whether Safari causes a problem, or I guess if people still use Internet Explorer or something like that. I can look into that.
And quick question, was there a question about sort of if you have lived next to some new construction, if there was an impact on that? I don't remember. Maybe there was. Was that a sort of something like, because that's what I'm kind of hearing, like this case of my neighbor and her mother's neighbor. It's like a new construction where there's tons more, I guess, impervious surface.
I don't think, I have that survey. I don't think exactly, I don't think we wanted to get to my neighbor is, you know what I mean? It's hard because especially you don't know how private it's going to be, and to try and, point the finger. But I think there are enough questions in here that you will be able to kind of tell.
Well, question 3, option E, does say that what do you think are the main causes? And it does offer you the opportunity to say changes my neighbors have made to their landscaping or home.
We said plural, it's neighbors, so it could
be
neighbors, 4 houses up the hill.
But then when you're looking at the results, you can always match by address where the new construction is, right? I mean, without them saying that.
Again, if people have that problem, then we need an entertainment committee. So
yeah.
And I'm not going to call Marnie out on that either. Right, so.
Yeah,
being my neighbor.
Yeah, no, good job, guys. It's a very helpful, and really kind of made me stop and think about all these things. So yeah, actually gave me a little PTSD because we have had a recent basement flood, but that's okay. That's not your issue.
All right. So. Sorry about that. Okay, so let's move along to the next committee, which is impacts on stormwater.
Okay, so unless Julie A. or Brian who object, I'm going to share my screen and
go for it.
Yeah, okay. So we are going to put something in the Google folder, in our subcommittee folder, that tells a bit about what we're starting to see as implications of our work, but I'm just going to do sort of a progress report, just what we've done to date and what we plan to do in the near future. And then if people want to go into the Google folder to see those implications starting to build, they can do that.
They're incomplete, just as a caveat, but
yeah. Okay, so let me just go up here. Okay, here's what we've done to date. So we basically have 6 sections of draft report that constitute the other impacts other than construction. And we've got 4 of these 6 sort of fleshed out now. Climate change, trees and vegetation, our topography and soil type, generally speaking, understanding there's lot by lot variation, stormwater gutters and sewers, and the homes and public infrastructure like parking lots, roads, all that. And we've all got all but a few loose ends on this, sort of a basic primer on how you calculate runoff that is sort of designed just to help the committee and town residents get some sense of what the volume of water is that we're talking about, from sort of a 1-year event, which is 2.6 inches, and a 10-year rainfall event, which is 4.1. And I've talked about these calculations and shared them with people on our committee and on the impact of construction committee. So we're all sort of on the same page on that. What do we plan to do next? Well, we've got a big, Brian and Julie Abrams are doing this, this section on trees and vegetation. And in the sort of as part of the part of that, they're putting together a simple database that will deal with the removal of trees that have gone through the permitting process in town, both for just regular, single tree removals, and also in the course of doing construction and, with revegetation plans. And then just finishing up on this public infrastructure, we have to do a little calculation on roads and parking lots, and then we'll polish the draft report and, provide that, upload it, and provide information to people on the final implications. So I think we're going to be in, I think, really good shape for the date to get information to you, Ellen, for whatever you want to include on this part of things in that first Town Journal article.
Great.
And when is that? Because there's some things, I mean, like the climate change stuff I want to flesh out more, but what's the timing? It's February 10th for some reason, I think, or.
Well, there's by February 12th, we wanted to have, it's not going to be written by then. We wanted, let's see, March 12th, so it would give us a month. We're going to submit it, I think. Does that work, Matt? I hope. When I looked at the dates, so we wanted to have like February 12th as the deadline, and then we'll have, a few weeks to write up the report. It shouldn't take that long, but I know that some people might be lagging and need some extra time. So that's the deadline.
Yeah.
Also, I did put on there, it's kind of the upcoming dates and deadlines are coming up. So it's important that people kind of know with your own committee, things to look forward to, and kind of your own schedule for your own subcommittee would be great, so that I don't have to say, okay, you got to have the committee report in a week and you're already working toward that. But it looks like this committee is well ahead of where they need to be. Nice work.
Okay. And can I just make one comment? So yeah, Brian and I are doing the tree databases, as Julie mentioned. So one thing, just in, I guess, because there are a number of town council members on, is just that the town doesn't seem to have just like paper records of tree removals that are purely non-construction reasons, meaning dead trees removed for other reasons. So we're kind of going through town journals. If those we can't find, we'll get through the minutes. But I just want folks to know that I think ideally it would be available, and if not, certainly going forward, but that's not a really good thing about the town's record keeping. So anyway, and if we're missing information or we're misinformed, I apologize. So.
Okay.
Franny's raising her hand, I think. Franny's politely raising her hand.
I'm not seeing all these hand raisers. Okay, Franny.
Yes, I just hearing Julie Abrams' point about that. I think that I mean, all of these trees go through Tolbert, and so I guess I wonder if Tolbert has records that he could provide to you. I don't know if that's something that Matt Trollinger wants to comment on, but certainly whenever a tree permit application comes into the town office, it's reviewed by Tolbert. So I'm sort of I'm sorry to hear that you're having trouble getting data, but I hope that this is something that we can provide to you with maybe a call to him.
Yeah, I did talk to Tolbert about this. He had commented that his email had deleted all of his emails from before, I think, last year or something. So unfortunately, he had lost all of his records of that. And I tried to kind of go back and go through emails that had been received through the town from Tolbert, but thought that it might just be easier to go through the town journal since the tree removals are also posted in there.
I mean, that is what we're doing, but I guess and I appreciate, because I know, Matt, you've been helping us out on this, but but I guess I just want to say for the town council folks, and therefore Mayor Jeffrey too, and is that I think it should be important to, from here on in, those are the kind of records, even if they're digital and, scanned and in whatever, I don't know if you have a shared drive or whatever, I don't know how the town keeps its records, but to me, these seem like important things. We're looking more at tree issues, we're looking at stormwater issues, just in terms of, responsibility of town data. It just seems like, I just wanted to flag to
Yes.
please do that going forward. So
Yeah,
that, you know,
absolutely.
it should, independent of any given one person, the town should have that access to that electronic information, so.
Absolutely.
And I see Marnie has her hand up, but just to follow up on that point, the database that we build is something that we can certainly hand off to the town as well, that you can then keep up to date. You'd want to scan all the permits in, so you have them, but at least you could also keep the database up to date, so we always have this information going forward.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I guess also just I think we're also envisioning it could very much dovetail into this word with if there is a tree inventory done, you know, if we have a current status of all the trees in town, both public and private property, and then this is every tree that's cut down or for whatever reason, that it becomes a kind of mathematical, you know, component of it. So I think ideally that would, you know, synchronize with that and contribute to town data. But yeah, absolutely, we're just building it for this purpose, and absolutely it'll become town property. So.
Okay, great. Can we move on to construction impacts on stormwater?
Okay, I'm going to speak for my committee, I guess. And I just spent a lot of time trying to do some calculations to compare you know, if you have a rebuild, what do you call it, a tear down and rebuild, how to compare that runoff from just a sort of original Somerset house. And if you want, I can share my screen and just show you the upshot. And it's really, there's so many, hang on a second here. There are so many different variables. It's hard to compare, but I actually also put this document into the directory, the Google Drive. So this is my house, and it's kind of got an average kind of lot size. I mean, it's near the average, 8494 square feet. And here's what's interesting. So if hang on. Okay. Sorry, my daughter is here. The total runoff, let's just look at the 1-year rainfall event, because the 10-year rainfall event I wasn't sure how to deal with, but the total runoff is 745 cubic feet. But if you look at where that comes from, some of it is coming from the house, and in the old houses, a lot of the runoff goes directly to a storm drain. So that's the thing, you can't do this in the new houses, but in the old houses, it can go, like, it just comes down from the gutters and goes into a drain. So in reality, you only ever see this 396 cubic feet going to the neighborhood. Okay, this is, again, there's so many variables, but this is just a rough thing here. If you go to, this was one of the houses that was built, 4509 Cumberland. The cubic feet of the lot, the square feet of the lot size, it's a tiny bit smaller than my yard. But the house, I didn't say this on mine, the total impervious surface on this lot is 42.7%. On my original house, it was only 26%, okay? On their house, this house had a 27% waiver. I tried to highlight what was important. The total runoff to the neighborhood that's not sent to the dry well. So they have 3 dry wells. I'm sorry, I'm not saying this very clearly. They have 3 dry wells. And the runoff to the neighborhood that's not sent to the dry wells is only 473 cubic feet. That compares to, what was mine, 745. Sorry. Mine is 396 because I was saying this before. That's what's not going into the storm drain from my house. So it's less than the new house, but part of the reason is that all the stuff from my house is going into the storm drain. So on the new house, there is more going into the neighborhood because they can't send things to the drain, basically. And then I did the math to see what would happen if they didn't have that 27% waiver. And if they didn't, then they would only have 322 cubic feet, which would be better than my house. So there's a lot of numbers here, but it just kind of gives you a rough idea of what's going on. We're trying to kind of, I'm gonna stop the share here, trying to just kind of get an idea of what's going on with these numbers and how much of an impact it has, the new construction. If I'm saying this very well.
Great. Any questions or comments? Okay, thank you. Next is rules and regulations.
Courtney, you want to take that way?
Yeah, we haven't
Or
spoken.
we're behind basically. I know Courtney, you were working on the survey and I was working on this is not an excuse on my part. And I've been behind on the other committee, but I know the two of us and Ed Schwartz need to get on it basically. So not your star pupil, Ellen, sorry.
Okay, all right, that's okay. I appreciate the honesty.
Okay.
So the next one is resources.
So Julie and I are working on resources, and it's kind of focusing on things that work and what people can do to control the storm runoff, both new and construction and existing. And so one of the things we started to do is interview people who have done a new construction project and who didn't need to get a waiver. And we've talked so far to one person, and we're setting up appointments with other, but just about how that process went. And it's really interesting about why did they didn't even think about getting a waiver. And it was just a given that they weren't going to go for one, the people we talked to. And they did wind up doing dry wells, and they had planned for them. So it was interesting, but then they wound up, when the construction actually happened, they couldn't put the dry wells in where they thought they could, but they moved them. And then just hearing the project's about 10 years old, how they've had to, the upkeep of the dry wells and stuff like that. But it was very interesting to hear that it was possible for them. And they didn't, at least the people we talked to now, didn't consider trying to go for a waiver. They just felt it was one of the things that you had to follow. And it seemed to work, even given that their site, because of trees, tree roots, they couldn't put the dry wells where they wanted to, but they were able to put them in. Though he did mention that there was still some problems, just given, and probably that had always been there, with some runoff onto the neighbors that was bothering the neighbors, and they wound up solving that by doing a French well that they paid for, but on their neighbor's land. So it was just interesting.
And they also put in permeable pavers
yes,
on their own, just choosing that it wasn't required.
Was this an older house? Because they said, forget, the guy had said that the older houses didn't have waivers because they didn't realize that they needed waivers.
This was done a year. He said it was a year or two after Montgomery County had passed the new rules.
Oh, okay.
2012.
And they knew about it. And he knew about it, and his builder said, "Yeah, we can go for a waiver," and they had chosen not to.
Okay.
And it said, and we just built in the cost of the project. We knew it had to. We knew that the cost of the project had to cover stormwater stuff. We weren't gonna do a project that didn't include that.
And about how many different case studies are you planning to do, and what kind of?
I'm thinking, I'm not quite sure, but I think we're going to mostly look at the people who have done it successfully without a waiver, just to show that it is possible to do it without a waiver. That's, Julie, do you have
Yeah.
I mean, honestly,
I
I don't necessarily need to talk to the people that went for a waiver, because I don't think we need to pass on how to get a waiver. At least that's my point of view. Does anybody have a feedback?
Julie, were you going to say something?
Well, I think it will go until we feel we're not learning anything useful. But there are, I guess there are 14 homes. Now we might we might contact people and have them say, well, we just moved in a year ago, we have no idea, because it may not be the original owner. It probably is best to talk to only the people who who are still living in the house where the construction and design was made. So maybe that's the best.
And I think further, I mean, we're going to also look at people who've done rain gardens. I mean, this is just the first month of the project. I see talking to people that have had rain gardens, and I also see talking to some, experts about I guess there's another committee that's on experts, but talking about just gathering more information about what has been done, and definitely, putting something together that mentions the rain garden thing in Montgomery County, the this, the that, so that by the end, there's like something somewhere, a document on the internet where people say, oh, I'm interested in doing this. How do I even go started? I'm interested in putting in a rain garden. I have no idea. And also just kind of having the information if people are clicking around to build a new house, what do they do in Somerset for stormwater stuff? What do I have to expect in Somerset? I mean, that's more I see of the whole committee, but just that we're trying to see what's possible to control it.
Well, one of the things I thought this committee I think it's this committee was going to do, or some committee I would hope would do, was to find successful projects within the town that we could document, and then maybe even on some day have sort of open houses for people to go
Good idea.
see examples and talk to the people who put them in, and when they put it in, and whether it's how it's working, etc. So
I think that would be great. I think that there's probably people that are willing. It was really interesting to hear the project and how enthusiastic the homeowner was, and I mean, it was just very interesting to see that some people do kind of take it into account. It's not like, oh darn, I have to do this.
I think it also is nice because a lot of times new homeowners, new construction people get a lot of grief, and it's nice to them to say, no, this is what I said, and this is how I'm, helping the community, and they're also helping their own land as what their own yard as well.
No, and I think what we were just what Kaya said, because I'm on that committee with her too, that just some of the runoff from the old houses is horrible. It's not, it's impacting all kinds of stuff. So it is interesting to see that new construction could be bring improvements in the stormwater situation.
Right, and every new construction is also getting water from old construction.
Right, exactly.
Okay, thank you. All right, the last one is expertise.
Well, that's me. I mean,
so you've been
we had Kelly come today, but I'm not quite sure what we're supposed to be doing, but I mean, should I?
Well, I think it would be helpful to sort of build a catalog of people that people might use who are experts to call, or to, I think you have to be careful in terms of saying hiring them or whatever, but people that maybe you've talked to and who you found helpful, and a brief description or contact of what they do, so that other people can say, hey, I find this helpful. Maybe in the end we can post that up on the
I see.
Maybe we could, our committee, they kind of fit together too. I mean, maybe we could work together, because it kind of seems we're going to be doing kind of some of the same stuff. Haya,
well, Michael and I are both on.
So maybe.
I'm just not quite exactly sure.
Maybe we should just combine the.
I'm not exactly sure what we were supposed to, exactly.
No, I wasn't sure either. I mean, I think that maybe that might be a combination.
Okay.
And then any suggestions for next?
Franny's got her hand raised.
Oh, okay. Are we Franny again?
Franny, you're the most polite person in this entire group.
No one raises their hand.
Once I figured out how to do it, I'm flushed with power here. My question for the expertise committee would be, I would be interested, I don't know if the other council members also, I know we've talked about this at our level before. I would love to know what the options are at the county level for connecting to the storm drains for a house that otherwise would need a waiver for water being managed on the property. And I wonder if there would be anybody from the county who could speak to your committee about what the options are there, because it seems to me that, you know, they get to have sort of a hard line on whether or not you can connect to a storm drain, and then they're sort of quick to issue a waiver from their own requirements for managing water on site. But that doesn't help the community because, I mean, we have the storm drain structure in place, as Haya pointed out, especially for the older houses. And to the extent that newer houses are not permitted to connect to it, and also have perhaps soil problems or grade problems that would then lead the county inspectors to issue a waiver, you know, then it means that there's essentially no option for the community to manage the water. So I guess I'm just wondering if you could put that on your, I don't know who the person would be, but maybe there's somebody at the county level who could speak to that. So that's my
I just want to make sure I understand what you're asking. Is you're saying that if you're going to get a waiver, then can you send some of the water to the storm drains? Is that what you're?
I mean, that's sort of my question, because, you know, it seems like the houses that were built here in the 50s, a lot of them, I know my house included it, you know, the way it works for there not to be runoff is that the water is sent into the big storm drains.
No,
and I understand the environmental reasons for not doing that, but I'm curious to know if in a situation where the county would otherwise grant a waiver,
right,
if there would then be an option of saying, you know, then can we connect this particular project to an existing storm drain so that the water then doesn't flood into our community? So I'm not talking about it all the time. And like I said, I do understand the reasons why you wouldn't want to do that all the time.
Right.
But to me, it seems like like I said, they're holding the line 100% on the storm drains, but then granting waivers from their own rules for the stormwater. So
well, I was going to actually try to look into what's the deal with the waivers. You know, why the waivers?
I should say something at this point because Franny's misunderstanding something. Try to explain it. There are two kinds of drain system in town. One is the older waste sewage. That's, you know, when you flush your toilet, it goes down that drain, all right? The other is our stormwater drains, which there are a couple, and there are entry points to the stormwater drain on our streets, and only on our streets, okay? The older homes, the ones built prior to 1968, the water flows into the waste sewage, the same sewage system that when you flush your toilet, it goes into that sewage system. That flows below our creek bed. It's supposed to be 6 feet below our creek bed. It gets cleaned up, but it still goes to Chesapeake Bay. It gets out eventually to the same place. Newer houses go to the water is discharged to the street, which then goes to the storm drains. And the storm drains flow directly onto the surface of the creek. So if you actually go to the creek, you can look at the entry points for the storm drains that are on the surface of the creek. So for all of the homes built since 68, the water is flowing to the storm drains and not into the sewage drain. The wastewater sewage drain, that's because the wastewater sewage drain got overloaded very early. And we've seen major erosion, you know, as a result of that, and replacement of the sewage drain. That's happened. So when people are getting waivers, it's waivers from the water you have to keep on your own land. And what the waiver results in is more water discharged to the street, which then goes to the storm drain. That's the pattern. If anybody's got any questions about it, ask me now, okay, please.
Well, that's very clear, because I hadn't realized that. But yeah, because I was in on one of the meetings when we had our first committee, and they were saying that they couldn't control it on the land, and you were asking him the question, what were they going to do with it? And he said, we're going to run it out to the street.
Right, and that means it goes to the storm. Now, having said that, it doesn't always go to the storm drain. If there's a bend in the road,
right,
you know, blah, 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 then sometimes it ends up in a neighbor's property. That happens sometimes.
So if it goes to the street, is there any way, I'm sorry, the house is built after 1968, they just go to the street, or can they go directly to a storm drain, or they actually go to the street?
They go to the street, which takes them to the storm drain.
Okay.
Usually, not always.
Okay.
And sometimes the storm drain gets blocked, and then of course it floods into neighboring properties. That
Right.
happens too,
Okay.
stuff
But so
happens.
my house, which was built in the 50s, I see the water going into a thing into the ground, and that's going into the waste system.
Sewage, yeah.
So that's why I was curious to know if there was somebody from the county who could talk about how that process, how the
Yeah.
stormwater waiver
Well,
process
we
might be
did
better.
have-
That's what I wanted to
There
know.
was
too.
somebody last week, our last meeting.
Yeah, he
on
Yeah,
the
I'm sorry I missed
waiver
that.
process. Yeah, we did have a meeting with somebody.
But I still didn't feel like it was answered, like, why are they,
He didn't want to answer it.
yeah, that's,
But,
I want to hold his feet to the
We have
fire.
a hand up. Ralph?
I just want to mention that the water from the storm drains, it doesn't just disappear. If you're on Trent or Uppingham or anywhere around in this part of Lower Somerset, it goes into my yard.
All of it?
And
Yeah, no, I mean, I did put that exception in, Ralph. It doesn't always make it to the storm drains.
if I keep my culverts clear, it
Hmm.
runs under my driveway into Little Falls Branch.
Yeah.
But if there's too much water, it flows over my driveway, across my lawn.
Yeah, our storm drains are overloaded right now. That is part of the problem.
Yeah, Ralph is even below where I am. So what comes off
yeah.
of my land then flows down to
Yeah.
Ralph.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a question. So we're the errant Rules and Regs Committee, but my question is, so I know currently these laws are all that we're talking about are all Montgomery County. We also have separate topical things that we in Somerset regulate. If we as Somerset chose to have very specific rules on these kind of topics, do we have the right as the town of Somerset to say for certain things, our rules will hold? Do we always have that option as a town? I guess just as a broader question in terms of implications of the kind of things we could do.
We can write our own code in the town on stormwater, and two of our neighboring communities actually have done that already. So I mean,
Right.
there's clear precedent for us to do that.
Right.
We got to make it good. I mean, one of the things that I do want to point out what Haya was saying is that when the county law was passed, it was trying to improve water retention on your land and to reduce the amount of water flowing into stormwater drains. That's what they were about. And for them, the water flowing down into the waste sewage plant is as bad as the water flowing into the storm drain. It's overloading that system too. It's sending stuff down to Chesapeake Bay. It's doing all the wrong things too. So when we're doing comparisons between new homes and old homes, we've got to count all of the water that is discharged from the old home, including the stuff that's going straight into the waste drain. Though we don't see it, it is doing damage. And that's why we need to count both. And it is the case that most of the new homes will do better holding on to water than our older homes, unless they have a very substantial waiver. That is true.
No, thank you. And just, I'm not sure when we wrap up, but I know Mr. Novak has all this decades of experience. I'm just really intrigued any comments from him about all of this. Not to put you on the spot, but I am.
Mr. Robeck, you are muted.
Okay. So a lot of this depends on the rules that you're under in what they call an MS4, municipal separate storm sewer systems. In some cases, we've kind of gone back to where we used to be in the sense that water in the US, we have built separate storm sewers over the last many decades, thinking that was a cleaner, better way to do it. Where the Europeans kept discharging to sanitary sewers. But what they were doing was putting in enough capacity to actually deal with that first flush in their treatment plants. So yes, if we just discharge it to the creek, or if we discharge to a sewer that goes to a treatment plant, a lot of this is going to depend on what kind of capacity do the plants have before they go into Chesapeake Bay? And do they have, I'm sure they have primary and secondary treatment. They may or may not have tertiary treatment. But if it just goes into what used to be unregulated till about 20 years ago, was separate storm sewers that discharged into creeks. But that started getting, they wrote new rules for that. So that's gotten a lot more strict. It still should be relatively clean, but there's a lot more oversight into any land development. It used to be 10 acres or more, went to 5, and some municipalities it's 1 acre or less as to development, what kind of stormwater and erosion control do you have to do. So those were originally, those kind of rules were put in for environmental pollution control, but as a side benefit, and now a main thing is what we call BMPs, best management practices, or low impact development. So you can end up using a variety of ways into really reducing the amount of runoff that you got. But a lot of it, I was looking, because of my son's house and some of the implications and the problems they've had with flooding, trying to put together a kind of a technical memo that I'll send to him to send on to the city and possibly the county. But I noticed a lot of the things for separate storm sewers, they don't even have design criteria anymore. The only design criteria they have for separate storm sewers, meaning they go to a creek, is just under the DOT, either the county or state Department of Transportation, and the type of inlets for roads. They don't have any inlet details to speak of for standalone, what we call area inlets. So I'm giving you a long answer to a short question, and I apologize for that. But a lot of this is going to depend on how the county is going to interpret it. After speaking to them a couple of times because of the issue on Cumberland, I was left with like, well, we don't really deal with stormwater on private property or design criteria. I'm sure that's not quite true, but a lot of it was really hard to find. So that leaves the question of, was that left to the small municipalities, or what do they have going now? And I don't really know. Matt will see my memo that I'm going to be sending to him shortly, hopefully maybe by tomorrow. So, but I was very intrigued by the question that Robin Barr asked about, and then went on from there about what kind, and then Julie followed up on what can we put in our own regulations? Can we? And that's a question I'd like to know too. So I don't know what level of authority the town of Somerset has on dealing with stormwater on private property. If you've got a set of rules, I would certainly like to know what they are. But you need to work hand in glove, of course, with the county. But there was a lot of, we don't go there from here. So I apologize for rambling like that, but I mean, there's so much of a it depends kind of approach to what are their rules. I assume Montgomery County is an MS4, but they may have divided that into some of the separate cities. So within the county, that they may have their own permits, their own stormwater discharge permits.
And my understanding is we don't currently have our own regulations, so we go, I don't know if defer is the correct word, but we use the counties, but that was what my question was, do we have the right to, and it sounds like we do, if we chose to establish code, the town of Chevy Chase right near us.
But now, don't we have the right now that if the county gives them the waiver, doesn't the town council have a right to say, no, maybe the county gave you a waiver, but we're not going to give you a waiver?
In most things dealing with stormwater, as well as FEMA's rules on floods, which is a separate thing, but they have some similarities, is usually the lower and smaller the political subdivision, they can make rules that are stricter. They cannot relax rules that are already in place at the next level.
Right.
So that would be from a city.
Because when we did our house renovation, the county had wasn't for stormwater, but the county had approved the plans and everything. And then when they came to the town said, no, our rules are stricter. You can't do what the county approved. And we changed our plans. And to me, it seems like even before we come with new rules, that if the town council wanted to do that, they could do that now.
They probably could. The only thing is,
I'm just asking, I don't know. I know they could do it. They could do it with other issues like setbacks and this and that. They can enforce.
you have to be really careful when it's, I'm sorry.
Sorry, we can't, I've actually asked the town attorney that question. We can't do it at the moment. We'd have to revise our code to do it.
For stormwater, but you can do it for other things, can't you, Robin?
Like historic preservation code and those other things. Yes, trees, for example, we got a whole chapter on trees, so we can certainly do it on trees.
Okay.
But we don't have separate code on stormwater, so at the moment we can't do that.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, you would have to write a code.
We'd have to write, that's right.
And make sure that it, again, is in step with the county's code,
Yes.
even if we're somewhat strict.
Yeah.
Right.
No, that's one of our subcommittees.
Yeah, I see similar. I'm on a planning and zoning commission myself, and years before I was on a stormwater committee. So I saw that at both levels. I'm sorry?
I said, how did that work out? I'm just curious.
Well, most things work out well. The Stormwater Committee it's a voluntary committee. I served on ours for several years. Also in real life, professional life, I was a technical advisor to another city where I was their advisor to their Stormwater Commission as well. So, I mean, there's so many ways to skin a cat, I guess, as to how you approach these. So we see this in planning and zoning when we want to change regulations of certain types. Anything we do is really a recommendation that goes to the city council. Now, I don't know if this committee that I'm sitting in on, are you members of the committee only, or are you committee members part of the town council as well?
We are a committee. We have a liaison to the town council.
Okay.
And that we're just sort of, we're supposed to do some research and put together, I think, some recommendations, and then our work pretty much ends.
I think we're technically called ad hoc. Is that correct? If I'm not mistaken.
No, that term, you are a committee. There's no such thing as an ad hoc committee.
Yeah, it's not.
Okay, very good. Okay, excellent. Good.
But you may end up making recommendations, and then the town council is the one that has to codify them.
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, thank you. It's getting late. Our next meeting is February 9th. And so if anybody has needs any help, please don't be afraid to contact me and ask. I mean, I'm not saying I know the answer, but I might be able to help you kind of think things through if you're struggling with sort of where to go. And thank you all for all your hard work. I think there's a lot of good information coming out of this group, and obviously people are taking it seriously and working hard, and have, I hope you're all learning something as I clearly am. And we'll see you at the next meeting. And
thank you for your leadership, Ellen.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Cheers.
Good night.
Good night.
Night, everybody.
Bye-bye.